They're big as a marble, I guess would be the way to describe them, a small marble. I have never successfully, consistently grown decent onions from sets because in our climate, it has been my experience that onions that are either too big when you start out or as sets, the first thing they want to do when they come up is bloom. And when they bloom, they pretty much stop growing and they totally lose all of their keeping properties. So don't plant sets, or if you want to experiment with it, go ahead. If you find some that work, let me know. I've tried a bunch of them and I've never ever been impressed with the results. When I plant the plants, I get onions that are about this big around. When I plant the sets, I get onions that are about this big around and don't keep. So don't waste your money on the sets. You can grow them from seed if you like. It's a lot of trouble. You do a lot of thinning, and you know, for the price, I mean, you can buy the bunches of onion plants. Typically have 100 to 125 plants to a bunch, and I think the bunches cost about $2. So for that price, you know, why buy the package of seed? If you do grow them from seed, it's an easy way to remember when to plant them. Is everybody familiar with the big old, what they call the Texas Super Sweet Onion, the 1015?
Oh, yeah.
You know why it's called the 1015? Planting date is October 15th. Those Aggies are not very creative down in the valley. But anyway, I don't think it's worth wasting your time growing those things. Again, the plants are so easy and they grow so well. Now, though there are a lot of good things. Yes, ma'am.
I read something that if you have green onions and you want to grow them, you cut off about an inch and you use them in the salad and you plant the roots and then they will grow. It didn't work for me. They grow.
Well, it should work, but why anybody would go to that trouble and expense, I don't know. But let me tell you how I recommend that you grow these onions. I mean, I love onions. I love onions, you know, grilled. I love green onions. There's hardly a way you can find to eat an onion that I don't think is a good thing to do. But remember, onions, given time, will form a pretty big bulb. But what I will do is when I plant my little onion plants out along that row, I will plant those little plants 1 inch to 1.5 inches apart. You know, and I'll just make row after row of these things. I usually plant several hundred of them. Then after about 6 weeks of growth, they're up to the size of those green onions that you're talking about in the store. And I will go through and I will pull out every other onion. And I've got the best green onions out there. And use them for whatever purpose, give them to whomever I think deserves some good green onions. And then we'll just go on growing them for a while longer. About another 2 or 3 months into the process, the onions have formed little bulbs about the size of the end of your finger. Delicious. There's so many good things you can do with that. So then I go back through and again I pull out every other onion up and down the rows. So now I've got more onions to eat, but the onions that are left in the row are spaced out about this far apart, which is about what they need to form that nice big bulb. Now if you don't want to harvest, you know, little onions as you go ahead and spread them out because, you know, they will need that space, you know, in order to make that big onion bulb. Now, with onions, it's important to keep the foliage healthy. Occasionally you get caterpillars get after them. More often than not, it's just a matter of not enough water or nutrient or something like that the tops may not be healthy. But you know when you cut an onion, you know how you have all the layers inside of the onion? You have exactly as many layers in the onion as you have leaves on top of the plant. Because if you follow that leaf down, you know, you'll find that's what it is. It makes one of those layers of onion. So the healthier foliage you have, the more healthy leaves you have, the bigger and plumper and better that bulb is going to be. So do everything you can to keep the foliage on your onions healthy, which means watering properly, which means keeping that little black and yellow caterpillar off of them that wants to get on them every now and then. And again, some years I'll plant onions in December, some years I'll plant them in January, some years I've planted them as late as February. Every now and then we get a hard enough freeze that it will really set the plants back. They almost always come out again. But last year, for instance, my December planted onions, when I harvested them in May, they were about this big around. My January planted onions were about this big around. So I'm going to plant more of them earlier this year. Now, when you get that bundle of little onion plants, nobody went through and graded them to be sure they're all the same size and uniform. They couldn't sell them for $2 if they did. So you're going to find some little plants, you're going to find some bigger plants in there. Plant them all, because they will all grow. Again, my experience with onions has been that the little onion plants that are bigger when you plant them will tend to bloom many times. And as we get later into the spring, as the onions are starting to mature, as the weather's gotten hot and they've started to make that big bulb, a number of them, and it's usually the ones that were the bigger plants, will decide to bloom. That doesn't mean you have to do anything different, but when you harvest those onions, put them in a different pile. Because the onions that have not, or the onions that have bloomed, don't keep. I mean, they may keep for 3 or 4 weeks, but the onions that haven't bloomed, I'm still eating onions that I harvested back in the spring. Don't tell anybody, because I've told them I'm out. I'm not sharing anymore. There are not that many of them left. But anyway, set the ones that have bloomed aside, because if you just mix those in with the others, they will rot, and they can reduce. They can kind of like the bad apple spoiling the whole barrel. You know, they can destroy some of the onions around them. But an onion that blooms, go ahead and make that one of the first things that you eat after you harvest it from the garden. If you want to leave them until they're fully mature, you can leave them until the tops fall over and start to dry. If you want to harvest them a little bit before that, you can. If you can remember where they are, you can wait till the tops are all gone. And then in a dry year, you can go back and dig them later. But you can grow absolutely wonderful onions in this area. My favorites are still the big old super sweets, the yellow onion, the 1015. But you can grow red onions, you can grow white onions, you can grow a lot of different kinds of onions if you want to. And leeks, you can grow them about the same way that you grow the onions at the same time. I'm going to come back, well, no I won't. I'll take just a second right now and tell you about 2 herbs, and then we'll move on and talk about snow peas. Yes, sir?
What kind of fertilizer would you recommend on onion?
I only use one kind of fertilizer in the garden, and that's what it is.
When do you plant the chives?
Chives are pretty much perennial. You can plant chives anytime you want to.
What about shallots?
Shallots, plant them pretty much like you do onions, although you will plant the little bulb in that case. And shallots and multiplying onions are closely related. Once you get a patch of them started, you just break them up once a year or so and replant part of it and eat the rest. Okay, 2 herbs. What's that?
Carry shallots here?
We'll see. We did last year. They're hard to find, and if they're available, we'll have them. 2 herbs that you may want to think about growing. One of them is cilantro, which is wonderful for so many reasons, and dill. These are 2 annual herbs that are grown from seed, and they have such great uses in the garden that I'll recommend both of them to you very highly. But these are cool weather herbs.
Dill.
And everybody always comes in April and May wanting to plant dill and cilantro. And you plant it, and immediately it bolts, goes to seed, and dies. If you plant them in the fall, and we don't get a hard freeze, they're cold hardy down to 20 degrees at least. But you can grow absolutely incredible cilantro and dill both. But they should be planted in the fall along with your leafy vegetables, your lettuces and things like that.
So it's too early for them?
I'd say by about 2 weeks it's too early. But certainly, it'll be time to plant them very shortly. The last vegetable, unless somebody has specific things you want to ask about. Yes, ma'am?
Do you plant them from seed?
Yes. Or we get little plants, but if you're going to plant a lot of them, plant them from seed. They grow easily from seed. Some things are difficult from seed. They're one of the things that's really very easy. The last thing that I really want to talk about is going to be snow peas, or edible pod peas, or really just about any kind of green peas. Unlike what we call black-eyed peas, which really aren't, or Crowder or purple hulls, those aren't really peas. They're actually more beans. But the peas are cool weather plants. But the thing to remember about growing peas, and I love the edible pods, the sugar snap, sugar and sugar bomb, all those things. But freezing weather, unless it gets bitterly cold, freezing weather does not hurt the plants, but it destroys the flowers. So there are some people that say, oh, go ahead and plant them this time of year, and if we have a very long fall, then you may get away with harvesting some, peas this fall. But something happened to do the same thing that happened with me in a lecture one time. The the person giving the lecture said, if I hear a cell phone ring, it means that that person is volunteering to buy drinks for the entire group. So, anyway, but so remember with your snow peas, with your edible pod peas, that they have to have time to mature some peas before freezing weather hits, or you won't get much production from them. Now, if you think we're going to have a long, cool fall, if you live south of San Antonio where we don't get as much winter, maybe you can think about planting some peas right now and harvest some from them. I typically plant